Well, good morning, Kensington. Hey. Our Kaleo kids are here with us this morning to wake us up and kick off the day. They are super hyped to be here because they love performing, but they also each had about 10 donuts backstage. So they're going to bring it this morning. If you don't know who Kaleo is, that is Kensington's creative arts program. We host 6 locations around the area, each one partnered with a local school. And the students come and get to learn music, dance, and drama, as well as leadership and character development. And we teach that by teaching them the heart of Jesus. So they're learning about forgiveness and their identity, sharing, telling the truth. And one of the really unique things about our program is we love to hear from them. So we give them a moment every session to kind of put in their own words what God's teaching them and what they would love to share with the world. And out of that has come these incredible songs. So we've even been surprised over the years at the words that these kids and the melodies that they come up with. And so the overflow of that is this CD project that you're going to hear one of the songs off this latest project. It's called Miracle Worker. It's our 3rd album, all written by kids ages 8 through 16. And the song we're going to do for you today is called Be With You. It's written by a girl named Lena Richardson. She's 12 years old. She's actually performing at our Clarkston location this morning. And she wrote this song as she was on a trip with her family to the Grand Canyon. And she was just out in nature and realizing how important it is that we slow down the pace of things and spend time with God. So I think it's something that we all can relate to. If you would like to support our program and get involved, we are going to be selling those CDs out in the lobby for a suggested donation of $10. All the money that we collect from this project is going into a fund so we can continue to expand it and include more kids in our program. So we would love to talk with you if you're interested in even knowing more about what we do, or grab a CD after the service. Are you guys ready? Yeah. All right, so let's give it up for the Kaleo kids.
Crashing waves catch my gaze. The sky is shade of blue. I'm always racing to the next thing instead of spending time with you. And I know my heart is restless until I rest in you. So all I need is to be with you. To be with you.
Wow. How amazing was that? Wasn't that amazing? Wasn't that beautiful? It is so incredible to see when God uses such young people with their gifts and with their calling. It's a beautiful thing, and we get to experience that together. I want to welcome you this morning. I'm excited to be here at Kensington. I want to also just welcome those that are viewing us via live stream. My name is Aaron, and I am the Student Ministries Director here at Troy, and I am excited to be here. Not only was it just amazing to see our Kaleo kids, but we have so many awesome things just ahead of us in the service this afternoon. Andrew Kim will be joining us and teaching this morning. So I'm excited for what God is doing in the midst of our community. Now, I don't know, how many of you in the room have been to Man Up? There we go. There's a couple. There's a few of us. For those of you that not have been, imagine the opportunity to get away, to kind of take a break from life and work and just the routine of things and be able to connect with men and be encouraged and have fun and laughter and all sorts of the silly things that we do as guys when we have opportunity to have some free time. But in the midst of all that, we hear time and time again, every single year, there are stories that come back from retreats like this, where God has been able to encourage and challenge and inspire men to be the men that God has called them to be. And so that is next weekend. There is still time and opportunity to engage and connect with Man Up. Now, speaking of retreats, you can see that I'm sporting our new Wild Retreat gear here on stage. For those of you that don't know what Wild Retreat is, it's a retreat for our middle school and our high school students. Every year, 600 to 700 middle school students pile into vans, buses, and we go to Spring Hill. It's an amazing time. Now, we call it wild for a reason, right? It's a wild time. And trust me, there's no liability issues when we say wild. It's just a good time for middle school and high school students to go and get away. And in the same way, we see incredible things happen. I can't encourage families with teenagers enough to be a part of the Wild Retreat. There are always moments, and I believe that really, and oftentimes, those are the moments we look back on in life, and we say, God did something there. And it's those accumulative effect of those moments and experiences that we see God work over time. And it's a beautiful thing. And so I want to encourage all of our families with teenagers, make sure Wild Retreat is on your calendar. Now, something here at Kensington that we communicate often, it's part of our heart, it's part of our strategy, it's this idea of moving out. That we would take the church outside of the building and be the church in and amidst our world Monday through Saturday. Did you know that the average American spends 1,800 hours a week in the workplace? Like, we probably spend more time in the workplace than we do at any other place and environment in our lives. And the hope and the call is that we would lean into these opportunities and allow Jesus to work in us and through us in our workplace. And so this Thursday, we have a special event here at the Troy campus where we've invited Jamie Winship to come and to share, inspire us, and give us tools and how we can move out into our community, move out into our workplace, and be the light of Jesus in and amidst those relationships. So we want to invite you to that. It's a great opportunity, and it's a free event. How about that? And speaking of moving out, in just a few weekends during the Detroit Marathon, our Hope Water Project runners will be at the marathon. They will be racing and raising awareness and funds for all of our clean water projects all around the world. And if you want to move out and volunteer and help make that event a successful event, we want to encourage you to join us. There's many ways that you can plug in. And with all of our events, opportunities, things that are coming up, you can go to the web, you can go to our app, you can check out all the information, and you can register there. We hope that you'll join us in some of those opportunities. Now, starting next week, we have this new series we're going to start, and it's called Don't Be That Guy. But before I say anything else, check out this video.
You are just the cutest thing ever. Yes, you are. Yes, you are. What have you been up to today? Did you have fun? Have you been a good boy? Yes, you have.
Is that your... what the heck?
Say hi to the nice lady. Can you show Daddy how much he loves you? That's right! I love you so.
Don't be that guy.
How many of you in the room, you're that guy? All right, what I'd like for you to do is I'd like for you to turn to your neighbor and say, don't be that guy. Go ahead. So on another note, on the same note of don't be that guy, for the next few weeks, we're going to begin this conversation of what it would look like for us to be a people of integrity and of good character, to not be the guy or the gal that struggles with hypocrisy, right? I know it's kind of a heavy subject, but I think we're going to have fun with it. It's going to be light, but it's also going to be challenging, and I want to invite you to not only be here, but to invite a friend. At this moment, I'd like to invite you to stand and greet those around you.
Is so powerful, isn't it? That thought that there is a love that is so kind that we can't get over it. Lord, that's what I plead today. Lord, let us love like you love. Can we understand that kind of love? That's what we're hoping is going to be happening. And then if you have ears to hear, if you can see this, if you can step in, no matter who you are, no matter where you stand, that there's a need, and we're saying, go, let's act, let's step into the need. That's really what we're going to be talking about the next 3 weeks in this series called Intentional Acts of Kindness.
Jesus is saying, when I was sick, you stayed with me. When I was in prison, you visited me. He's not asking us to fix it. He's asking us to sit in the middle of it and look at the person in their eyes and love them.
God, help me to see those who others have overlooked. Give me eyes to see. God, help me to see how I can be a blessing to a person on the fringe.
I think all of us can look at that and say, yes, there's something about it. There's something in us that really longs for that kind of interaction with someone. One act of love could bring so much change and transformation in someone's life, and that it would lead to another act of love and another act of love and another act of love and another that could really change the world.
You know, when you start to see people as valuable, you might go somewhere and it's the person's job to serve you, but as a follower of Jesus, it's always your job to serve them.
We're going to live out what we talked about last week, which is taking our eyes off of ourselves and looking at the world around us. If we're going to change this world and show them who Jesus is, we've got to have our hearts in the right place. I have to have my heart in the right place.
That's really the core of what this intentional acts of kindness is rooted in. What does it look like to have eyes to see people as God sees them in situations? What does it mean for our heart to break for the things that break our heart? And what does it mean to go out and just share his kindness rooted in him to a community?
Longing for a joy and a freedom and a passion with your Creator, it's possible. It starts with this heart. It starts with a heart condition. And Jesus is saying, I am the ultimate surgeon.
Can you imagine for a moment if every one of us in here, myself included, just prayed the prayer and said, God, help me to see the way you see. God, help my heart to break and listen to you and to be tender to hear from what you want me to do. Then that would be the rocket fuel that this church and our community and this world will need. And we could become a church that truly can say, we believe that actions speak louder than words, because the things that we're doing out here comes from right here. In order for God to change the world, he has to begin to change our hearts.
Well, I won't back down. No, I won't back down. You can stand me up at the gates of hell, but I won't back down. Oh, I'll stand my ground. I won't be turned around. And I'll keep this world from dragging me down. Yes, I'll stand my ground. No, I won't back down.
Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat on a bus in Montgomery, Alabama, and started a mass protest which led to the end of segregation on public transport. Dietrich Bonhoeffer was a German Lutheran pastor who was consistently outspoken in his criticism of Nazism in Germany. Preferring to stay in the country of his birth, he was eventually arrested and executed in 1945. During World War I, Edith Cavell, a nurse in Belgium, was arrested and executed for helping Allied servicemen escape back to England. Shortly before her execution, she said, "Patriotism is not enough. I must have no hatred or bitterness towards anyone."
Climbs up on the hill, climbs up on the hill, on the rock on which he stands. He looks back at the crowd, he looks down at his hands, and he says, I am a difference maker. I am a difference maker. Oh, I am the only one that speaks to him. Yes, I am the friendliest of friends of God.
Chiune Sugihara was a Japanese diplomat who helped several thousand Jews escape from Lithuania by personally writing exit visas, despite the fact he was disobeying orders from Tokyo not to do so. It is estimated that 6,000 Jews were able to escape from Lithuania and avoid the Holocaust. William Tyndale translated the Bible into English, which at the time was forbidden. For his controversial views and belief everyone should be able to read the Bible in their native tongue, he was later arrested and executed. Nelson Mandela had the courage to fight against the unjust system of apartheid in South Africa. For his political activities, he was sentenced to 20 years in prison.
He walks upon the hill to the rock on which he stands. He looks back at the crowd, he looks down at his hands, and he said, I am a difference maker. Oh, I am a difference maker. Oh, I am the only one that speaks to him. Yes, I am the friendliest of friends of God.
Malala Yousafzai, a Pakistani schoolgirl, defied threats of the Taliban to campaign for the right to education. She survived being shot in the head by the Taliban and has become a global advocate for human rights, women's rights, and the right to education. Maximilian Kolbe was a Polish Franciscan priest. During the Polish occupation, he was arrested twice by the Nazis, but continued to offer shelter to the Jews and Polish refugees. In 1941, he was sent to Auschwitz concentration camp, where he volunteered to take the place of a man condemned to death, showing great courage, faith, and dignity.
I am on the fence about nearly everything I've seen, and I have felt the fire be put out by too much gasoline. We're all strangers passing through a place in time. Afternoon, life is but a vision in the window that we're peeking through. A helpless conversation with the man who says he cares a lot. A passive confrontation about who might throw a punch or not. We are all transgressors, we're all sinners, we're all astronauts. So if you're beating death, then raise your hand, but shut up if you're not. I am a difference maker, oh I am the only one that speaks to him. I am the friendliest of friends of God.
In 1996, hundreds gathered to protest a KKK rally in Michigan. They chased down a white man wearing a Confederate flag t-shirt, knocked him down, and started hitting and kicking him. An 18-year-old girl, Keisha Thomas, threw herself on top of him to protect him from the angry mob.
I am a difference maker, oh I am the only one that speaks to him. Yes, I am the friendliest of friends of God. I am a difference maker. Yes, I am the only one that speaks to him. Oh, I am the friendliest of friends of God.
It's a powerful video because there are so many people that we just saw who have inspired so many of us here, including myself. People like Dietrich Bonhoeffer, Rosa Parks, as well as Nelson Mandela. And I remember a number of years ago, I was in Cape Town, South Africa, and I was on a ship, and we were sailing out to sea. And someone pointed off in the distance and said, "There's Robben's Island, the prison that Nelson Mandela was in for so many years. And his cell inside of that prison was 7 by 9 feet. It was a tiny cell. And he was there for years. And while he was in prison, he had to endure incredible difficulties as well as suffering. But during that time, he never lost focus. He never lost hope. He continued to persevere. And as a result, he was able to impact a nation and really the world by fighting against injustice. And these stories, what they remind me of is that they remind me that I can be a difference maker as well. Maybe not at the level of a Nelson Mandela or a Rosa Parks or a Dietrich Bonhoeffer, but every single day in the places that God has put me, in my workplace, in my neighborhood, in the gym that I work out at the grocery store that I shop at, I can impact the lives of others, their futures, every day. And that's true for every single one of us here. Every single one of us here can be a difference maker. And that's what this series that we've been in for the past few weeks has been all about. This series that we've called Intentional Acts of Kindness. And 2 weeks ago, when we launched the series, we talked about having the eyes of Jesus, to be able to see ourselves, to see others, to see situations and the world just as he does. And then last week, Danny talked about having the heart of Jesus, and that our heart would break for the things that break his heart, that we would care about the things that Jesus cares about. And having his eyes and having his heart, today we're gonna be talking about having the hands of Jesus, about what it means to go out and impact the world for him. And over the past 2 weeks, we've invited you, we've encouraged you to go out and to do exactly that, to be a difference maker in your communities, in the places that you find yourselves in. And so many of you have jumped on board, and all you have to do to see evidence of this is to go out into our lobby and to go and look at the Intentional Acts of Kindness board. And I was actually there yesterday night, and I actually read every single one. And 3 of them actually really struck me. And that the first one was written by a middle schooler, and he or she wrote, "I helped a new 6th grader open their locker." And all of us have been there. All of us have been freshmen in high school, freshmen in college, whether the 6th grader in middle school, in kindergarten, where we didn't know where anything was. We didn't know how things worked. And for this person, they stepped up and helped someone. I read another one. This person said, "I agreed to a 10-minute phone survey, and the woman asking the questions was so surprised because most people hang up on her." And you know what I thought? There is a special place in heaven for people who are nice to telemarketers. And I know this because I was a telemarketer for 3 entire days, and people are so mean to telemarketers. Person, I'm telling you, special place. Big reward coming for that person. This person did a prayer walk in their neighborhood, and they prayed blessings over their neighbors. And I thought that is such a practical thing that I and so many of us, every single one of us here, can do. Whether it's every week, whether it's every month, every so often, we can just simply walk around our neighborhood and pray for the people who we rub shoulders with probably on a regular basis. And that's something that we actually as a community have been doing. And if you go out into the lobby, you'll see a map out there, a prayer walk map. And we've been doing that all throughout the summer for months. And we're actually going to be wrapping this up for this season on October 6th. And so if you want to prayer walk with us, whether you've been doing it, whether you haven't done it, we want to invite all of you to come and prayer walk with us and pray for our local community one more time and just really celebrate what God has been doing, because there have been some extraordinary things that have happened as we've done this every single day, as our community has really done this every single day, every single week, every single month for the past several months. And so you all have made a huge impact in this local community. And in order for us to do these acts of kindness, oftentimes what it requires us to do is to step out of our comfort zone. And none of us here enjoy doing that. Because when we step out of our comfort zone, frankly, it's uncomfortable. But when we do, we find that we're able to experience something new and something amazing that we would have missed out on if we had simply chose to stay where we were. And just by a quick show of hands, how many of you love camping? Just by a quick show of hands, how many of you just love it? You could go every day. Okay, a number of you. How many of you can't stand camping? Okay, it's almost like a 50-50 split. And you know what? I'm with you all, because I strongly dislike camping. And the reason why I don't like camping is because I'm a clean freak, and frankly, camping, the whole camping experience isn't very clean to me. Because first of all, there are the toilets. Because the toilets are usually just a hole in the ground. And they smell awful, and particularly at night when I have to use the bathroom, that scares me to death because you have no idea what could be down there. And then, of course, and I'm sure all of you have noticed this, those of you who have gone camping, when you go camping, there's just a lot of dirt around. And inevitably, some of that dirt gets tracked into the tent, which I consider to be my clean and holy place, because that's where I sleep. And then there are the bugs, there are the animals, and honestly, I could go on and on and on. So because of that, I've only been camping 3 times in my life. And Aaron told you earlier that Man Up is happening next week. And initially I said, no way, there's no way I'm going to Man Up, because I thought it would be this rustic camping experience, and I just wasn't up for that. But I have been assured that we sleep in cabins and that there are flushing toilets and all of that. And so if you're not going to Man Up because of that exact reason, I want to invite you to go next week. I'll be there. Would love to see you there as well. But as I mentioned, I've only been camping 3 times. And the last time I went camping was a decade ago when I went to Yosemite. And I was so excited to go until my wife, Robin, told me that she wanted to camp. And then I was dreading the whole experience. But she's my wife, so I said, all right, I'll do it. And we got to Yosemite, to our campsite, just as the sun was setting. And so we quickly got out, unloaded the car, set up the tent, started a fire. And I remember I was heating up our dinner that was out of a can on this tiny little stove. And I kid you not, that while I was doing that, this giant RV drove in right in front of me and parked in the campsite right beside us, and then they started up their massive generator. And within half an hour, they were drinking wine, eating steak, and watching TV on their massive flat screen, all in their clean, temperature-controlled, bug-free RV. And I remember sitting on my hard rock, eating my lukewarm dinner out of a can, looking at them thinking, God, why do you hate me? But you know, we were in Yosemite for 4 days. We were camping for 4 days. And let me tell you, that experience was amazing. Because the toilets were clean. I was able to shower every day. We came up with a strategy to minimize the amount of dirt that came into our tent. The bears and all the animals stayed away, probably because of the really loud generator that was right beside us. The scenery, of course, was amazing, and the best part was being able to spend time with my wife, Robin, away from the distractions of everyday life, which was so incredibly life-giving. but I would have missed out on all of it if I had chose to stay within my comfort zone. And so often what God does is that he invites us to take a step out of our comfort zone. He invites us to share who he is with the people around us. He challenges us to live an open-handed life where we give away what we have to others. He tells us, I want you to go and love and forgive those people who have so deeply hurt you. And what we find is that when we do and when we take that step out, we're able to experience a life that is fuller, that is more free, and that is more beautiful, while also being able to impact the lives of the people around us. And this morning, I wanted to introduce you to a young woman named Esther. And Esther did exactly that, in that she took a step out of her comfort zone to do an intentional act of kindness. And one of the things that we've learned in this series is we're introduced in this series by Danny to this Greek term that's in the New Testament. It's only used a couple of times, but it's the term for kindness. And the Greek term is Christates. And what it means is to meet a real need in God's time and in God's way. And as we're gonna see this morning, that's exactly what Esther did. And Esther was a young woman who lived way back in the 5th century BC, and she was a Jew. And the Jews at the time, they were under Persian rule. More specifically, they were under the rule of an all-powerful king named Xerxes who considered himself a god-man. And Xerxes was the most powerful, he was the wealthiest person on the planet at the time. And one day, Xerxes decided that he wanted to throw a party. But this party wasn't gonna last a night, it wasn't gonna last a day, it wasn't gonna last a week or even a month. His party lasted for 6 months. Imagine being at a party like that. And this party was for all of the leaders in his kingdom. And the reason why this party lasted so long was that's how long it took him to display all of his wealth, because he was that rich. And after that party, no, he wasn't done. He decided to throw another party for everyone who lived in his capital city for another week. But on the last day of that party, he got drunk and he made a really bad decision. And he commanded that his wife Vashti come and parade herself in front of all of his guests. And the reason why he wanted her to do this is that he wanted to show everyone how beautiful she was and that she belonged to him. But Vashti had the dignity and had the courage to say no to the most powerful person on the planet. But in doing this, she embarrassed her husband in front of all of his guests. And surprisingly, her punishment wasn't death, but she was stripped of her crown and she was banished. And 3 years later, so Xerxes went without a wife for 3 years, but 3 years later, he wanted another wife. And so the most beautiful women in his kingdom were brought together. And some scholars believe that up to 1,000 young women were gathered together. And one of them was Esther, this Jewish orphan girl who had been raised by her cousin Mordecai. And out of all of these women, Esther was chosen. But something else very, very important that happened also during that time was that Xerxes appointed this man named Haman to the second most powerful position in his empire. So Haman was Xerxes' right-hand man. And Xerxes commanded that everyone in his kingdom, whenever they saw this guy Haman, immediately had to bow down to him. But Mordecai refused. And when Haman found out about this, he just flipped out. And he got so angry that he didn't just want to kill Mordecai, he wanted to wipe out all of his people. And so one day he sent out a decree on behalf of the king that on this future date, that every Jewish man, woman, and child would be killed. A genocide was about to happen. And when Mordecai found out about this, he was heartbroken and completely devastated. But you know what? Mordecai knew the queen. He knew Esther. She was his cousin. And so he sent word to Esther saying, hey, you know what? This is what is about to happen to our people. You need to go and see your husband. You need to go and see the king and beg for mercy on behalf of our people. And this was Esther's response. All the king's officials and even the people in the provinces know that anyone who appears before the king in his inner court without being invited is doomed to die unless the king holds out his gold scepter. And the king has not called me to come to him for 30 days. See, you know what Esther's response was? In regards to Mordecai's request to save her people, she says, no, I think I'll pass. And according to the historian Herodotus, there were only 7 men in the king's court, and they were called the king's friends. Don't know if they were like Facebook friends or they were actually really friends, but nevertheless, there were only 7 men who could enter into the king's presence unannounced. Everyone else, including the queen, had to request an audience with the king through his messengers and wait for an invitation, because at that time, it was illegal. It was a crime to go into the king's presence unannounced. And if someone did, the punishment was death, unless the king extended his gold scepter out, which meant that he was extending mercy to that person. And as we read, Esther hadn't seen her husband for 30 days and didn't think that she was going to see him anytime soon. And she probably thought, you know what? Maybe he's not interested anymore. Maybe he wants to move on from me. So she was afraid and unwilling to try. She was unwilling to step outside of her comfort zone. And as we saw earlier, part of the definition of kindness is to meet a real need. And for Esther at that time, she saw there was a real need right in front of her because her people were about to be killed. But what prevented her from moving forward and moving past her comfort zone, outside of her comfort zone, and meeting that need was fear. And fear, what fear is so good at doing, is that fear so often paralyzes us and creates limits in our lives. And this is actually what we talked about this past Wednesday at Midweek. And Midweek is our Wednesday night service where we meet right here in this room on the 2nd and 4th Wednesday of the month. And it's an opportunity for us as a community to come together, we sing together, we hear God's truth so that we could then go out into the rest of our week and impact the people around us for Jesus. And so this past Wednesday, we talked about the fact that what fear does is that creates limits in our lives. And it doesn't matter what type of fear it is. For Esther, it was a fear of death. For some of us here in this room, it might be the fear of the unknown, fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of judgment, fear of what other people may think about us. But what fear so often does, what it is so good at doing, it prevents us from moving forward and meeting needs because it paralyzes us, it freezes us in our tracks and doing those acts of kindness. And I remember one time I was at the grocery store. And I must have had like 5 or 6 items. And I was behind this woman who had a ton of items. And so she was checking out, and the cashier was finished checking her out. And so she was rifling through her purse, trying to find the money. And it became evident that she was a little bit short. And so she looked embarrassed. And so she was looking at all of her items thinking, what can I take out? What can I just leave behind? And you know what I thought in that moment? I thought, this is a perfect opportunity for me to step up. And I could just pay for her groceries, and it's not that big of a deal. But then other thoughts entered into my mind, and I started thinking, oh, you know what? What if she doesn't want my help? What if I offend her? What if she rejects me? And all of this fear started creeping into my heart, and so I froze, and I just literally just stood there looking at her. And what happened was the person behind me, they walked around me like I was a pylon and asked this woman, can I help you? I'd love to pay for your groceries today. And this woman was so extremely grateful. And I'm thankful that he did that. But the reason why I didn't was I was paralyzed by fear. And as I mentioned, maybe some of you have experienced this as well. But that's what fear is so good at doing, creating limits in our lives and saying you can only go this far. And that's what we see with Esther. It paralyzed her. And she refused to move forward, to step out of her comfort zone, to meet a real need. And just by a quick show of hands, how many of you have a fence in your backyard? Okay, so a number of you do. And prior to moving here to Michigan, my family and I, we used to live out in the Philadelphia area. And our house out there, it had this big white fence that completely enclosed our backyard. And what this fence did was that it kept people and animals out, and it kept our 2 young children in. And in the area inside of the fence, we tried to remove everything that could potentially harm our children and everything that they could potentially harm each other with. And so the area inside of the fence was safe, it was controlled, it was predictable. So the area inside the fence was known, the area outside of the fence was unknown. And our children were not allowed to venture outside of the fence without our permission. That fence was their limit. And so often, that's exactly what fear does to us. It establishes limits in our lives. And so if we're afraid of failure, we won't try. If we're afraid of rejection, we won't put ourselves out there. We'll stay within the fence. Because you know what? inside of the fence, it's safe, it's controlled, it's predictable, it's known. We love to stay within the inside of the fence. But if we want to have an impact in this world, if we want to actually move forward and to meet real needs, it requires us to move past our fence. It requires us to move past our fears and to step out of our comfort zone to meet those needs. And so often when we do, and probably many of you have experienced this in your life, I know I have, is that when we step beyond our fence, what we're able to experience is a greater degree of freedom in our lives. But going back to the story of Esther, what we see is that Esther initially said no to Mordecai. No way, I'm doing this. But Mordecai refused to accept her answer because not only was his life on the line, but his people's lives were on the line. And so this is what he said to her. He said, don't think for a moment that because you're in the palace, you will escape when all the other Jews are killed. If you keep quiet at a time like this, deliverance and relief for the Jews will arise from some other place, but you and your relatives will die. And so Mordecai was saying to Esther, don't forget that you're a Jew too. And that just because you're the queen and that you're in the palace, don't think that when this day comes that you're not gonna die too, because you're gonna die and so is your family. He was reminding her about what was about to happen. And then Mordecai said something very powerful and very insightful. And he said, who knows if perhaps you were made queen for just such a time as this. And that phrase, for just such a time as this, is the most well-known phrase in this Old Testament book called Esther. And what Mordecai was saying to her was, what if God has woven everything together to bring you to this exact place at this exact time to meet this need? What if God has strategically and intentionally placed you here at this moment so you can do this act of kindness? Because remember, the definition of kindness that we looked at earlier is to meet a real need in God's time. And Mordecai was saying to her, what if God has put you in this place with this type of access in your position in this moment so you can move forward and help your people? What if that's the reason why he has you here in this time? And Jesus told us something very similar in the Gospel of Matthew, in that he said that you are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden. And that word set in the original Greek can also be translated placed. And it communicates this idea that this city that is on this hill is not there by accident, but it has been purposely placed there by God at that specific location at that specific time to serve a very specific purpose. And like this city, every single one of us are put in very specific places at very specific times to meet very specific needs. And some of you might be thinking, you know what, that's not me. That might be you. That might be the person sitting over there, but that's not me. Because you know what? When I was driving the other day to work, I was just driving at the time that I always drive to work. And when I was on that road that I always take, I saw that person who needed help, and so I stopped to help them. But you know what? That was just random. That was just a coincidence. Or the other day, I was just driving home from having dinner with a friend when I remembered, oh yeah, I need milk. So I dropped by the grocery store, and I was in line to pay, and I saw that the person in front of me was a little short on money. Or yesterday, I was just mowing my lawn like I do every single weekend when my neighbor drove in to his driveway. And we were just catching up and just talking when I found out that our neighbor across the street is having trouble making ends meet. It's just a coincidence, it's just random. But you know what we see in the story of Esther? You know what Jesus tells us? Is that it may seem random to us, it may seem like a coincidence to us, but it's not. Because he puts us in very specific places at very specific times to meet very specific needs. And this past week, I was in a meeting, and one of the people that was in this meeting was Nancy Brown, our K-Kids director, and she shared in this meeting about an interaction she had recently at a doctor's office. And Nancy told me that I could share this story and also use her name. But Nancy is a breast cancer survivor, and so her doctor recently asked her to come back in because he had seen something on one of her scans. And so she went in, and her doctor ran a few more tests and then asked if she could wait in the waiting room for the results. And when she walked in, she saw somebody else from our community sitting there. So she walked over to her. And when she looked in her eyes, she noticed that her eyes were filled with tears. And so Nancy sat down beside her, waited with her, prayed for her, and also told her that no matter what the results, that she would be okay and that she wasn't alone and that she would walk with her. And then they parted ways. And you know what? Nancy didn't think too much about that because, you know, when she was struggling with breast cancer and on that journey, because so many other people had done the exact same thing for her, she didn't really think too much about it. But she saw this woman again a little bit later. And this woman approached Nancy and told her how much her presence, how much her words had impacted her life. And she said to Nancy, "It's absolutely crazy that you were there at that exact place, at that exact time." And she said, "I believe that it was God who put you there in that doctor's office that morning to walk with me." It's a great example that things aren't random, things aren't just coincidences, but God does put us in specific places at specific times to meet real needs. And our co-founder and the leader of our movement, Steve Andrews, says, you know what? There are no accidental meetings. And I believe that. Because God is a God who's not random, it's not about coincidences, but he is very purposeful, and he strategically and intentionally places us in certain places at times to do acts of kindness. But going back to this story of Esther, Esther's hesitant. And she's like, I don't know if I want to actually do this. I don't know if I actually want to help out my people and go and risk my life. But ultimately, what enabled her to do this giant 180 was understanding that she hadn't been put in her position with her access to the king at that time for her own benefit, or for her own comfort, but rather to do this act of kindness to meet this need of her people. And so this is what she said to Mordecai. Go and gather together all the Jews of Susa and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. My maids and I will do the same. And then, though it is against the law, because remember, it was illegal, it was a crime to go in and see the king unannounced, I will go in to see the king. And then she says these powerful words, if I must die, I must die. She was willing to sacrifice everything. And so she was true to her word. And 3 days later, she was getting ready to go in and see the king. And you can imagine, for her, standing outside the throne room, the king's throne room, how nervous, how afraid she must have been, thinking that this might be the last few moments of her life. But she refused to allow her fear to limit her, to establish the limits of her life. And so she moved past her fence. She moved past her comfort zone, and she went in. And when the king saw her, he extended his gold scepter to her, which meant that he extended mercy to her. And in that moment, I bet she breathed a huge sigh of relief. And as a result of what Esther did, because of her courage, Haman's plot was uncovered and her people were saved. But Esther was willing to sacrifice everything to meet this need. And as I was thinking about what Esther did, I was reminded that this is God's way. Because this is exactly what God did for us, in that he gave us everything. And this is what the Apostle Paul says in the New Testament book of Romans, and that he wrote, but God demonstrates his own love for us in this. While we were still sinners, Christ died for us. And he says that while we were still sinners, because before Jesus came, our predicament as human beings was that we were separated from God because of our sin. We didn't have a relationship with him, and there was nothing that we could do in and of ourselves to fix that, to restore that relationship. And we needed a savior. That was our need. And at the perfect time, what God did for us is that he sent Jesus into this world. The Son of God stepped into human history, was tried, tortured, and killed for your sins and for mine, so that whoever chose to follow him could experience not just any life, but a life that is more amazing and more extraordinary than that we could ever understand or imagine. That's what he did for us. He didn't give us leftovers. He didn't give us second best. He gave us his only son, because that is God's way. And one of Jesus' disciples, whose name was John, he says, in light of what God has done for us, this should be our response. And he writes, this is how we know what love is. Jesus Christ laid down his life for us. And because he did, we ought to lay down our lives for our brothers and sisters. And what John is saying, because of what Jesus did for us, because he gave everything for us, that when we see a need, we're not to give somebody leftovers or second best. In the same way, we are to give our lives away as well. This is the inspiration, this is the motivation as to why we do acts of kindness. We are meant to be kind to others because God was first kind to us. And when you think about it, this isn't just the inspiration and the motivation as to why we do acts of kindness. This is the inspiration and the motivation for the entire Christian life. Because the reason why we're to be kind to others is because God was first kind to us. The reason why we're to love others is because he first loved us. The reason why we're to live a life of generosity is because he was first extravagantly generous to us. The reason why he tells us, I want you to go out and to forgive the worst of your enemies is because he first forgave us when we were his enemies. This is the inspiration behind why we do what we do as followers of Jesus. That's exactly the reason why. Absolutely. This is why we do these acts of kindness. It's because he first loved us. He was first kind to us, and this is our response to that. And when you think about this entire series is such a great summation of the gospel. Because Jesus came to this earth to give us new eyes, to reframe our vision. So we wouldn't see with these old eyes that we have, but rather so we could see it in a different way. We could see ourselves as he created us to be, so we could see others as he created them to be, so that we could see this world in a new way. He came to give us new hearts, to transform our hearts, to take our heart of stone and to give us a heart of flesh. So our heart would break for the same things that break his heart. And having these eyes and having this heart, then we could go out with his hands and change the world and create it to be something beautiful and amazing, what he intended and created and destined it to be. Such a great summary of the gospel. And that's also the heartbeat. This series is also the heartbeat of this place. Because every single day, one of the things that we understand here at Kensington is that we can't do anything of worth, we can't do anything of value by ourselves. So every single day, we pray and we ask God, God, please give us your eyes to see. Please give us your heart to feel. And please give us your hands so that we could then leave what is comfortable in pursuit of the one, that person who does not know you. And that is why I love this place, and that is why so many of you love this community as well. And when we have these eyes to see, and when we have this heart, and with these things we then go out with the hands of Jesus, we are able to powerfully impact this world. And you're gonna see a video in a moment that shows us the impact that we can have when we go out with these three things. And as we're watching the video, I also want to invite the ushers to come forward to receive our offering. And if this is your first time here, please do not feel any obligation to give. We're just thrilled that you're here, because I sometimes like to say, you know what, the first time's free, so don't worry about it. Right? But after the service, what we'd love for you to do, if this is your first time, to go out and to visit the Hub, and you'll see it. There's screens all around it that say the Hub. We'd love to meet you, get to know you, tell you a little bit more about our community. And if you are somebody who does give, whether it's here or online, we want to say thank you for catching the vision of this place and giving in a generous way. But check out this video.
Hey guys, my name is Jill, and one of the coolest things that I get to be a part of is School Partners. We have 11 school partners across Metro Detroit. We're in the schools on a weekly basis. We're walking alongside the teachers. We're helping kids with their math, their reading, library time. Another awesome program we have is Kaleo Kids. It's an after-school arts program. Guys, there is so many cool things happening in these schools. So basically, School Partners is all about fostering relationships and building community. So we're standing in Owen Elementary, and my friends behind me, Mark and Linda and Laura and Haley, they're actually loading up a bunch of copy paper and gift cards that every staff member is going to receive. But it's actually not it. They're also finding out today that they are going to receive 2 welcome mats at both of their entrances. They're also going to receive a curriculum. Each teacher is going to have this curriculum. Currently, they're sharing the curriculum between classrooms. That will no longer be. They'll each have their own. And finally, they will receive a all school-wide assembly. It's all about character building and identity. You guys, I am so excited to go inside and surprise the teachers. This is awesome. All right, guys. So we are actually in the hall at Owen Elementary, and we're getting ready to go surprise the teachers. Mrs. Smith, the principal here, she called a mandatory staff meeting, and we surprised them with coffee and desserts, and they think right now, like, that's all they're getting. And I'm so excited because we're gonna go interrupt staff meeting and give them all the gifts. Hey, guys.
Hi.
Hey, I know you guys are in staff meeting. I'm really sorry. We actually have a really cool surprise for y'all.
Well, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
So listen for your name, you guys. All right, go ahead and open up the card and check it out. This gift card is for you guys to spend on you. Don't spend it on your kids. Don't spend it for your classroom. Don't spend it for your boyfriend or husbands. This is for you.
Wow.
Yeah, we're actually not done. We're actually not done yet.
Can I sit with them?
I actually would love for you to open this up, and there is something in here that we would like for you to read out loud to your staff. You have to read it out loud.
Wow. Dear Ms. Smith and the Owen Elementary staff, what an honor it is to celebrate each of you personally today. But it doesn't stop here. We have 3 more surprises to share with you. First, a custom design entry rug will be created to welcome staff, students, and families and visitors to Owen Elementary School in the Kennedy Center. Second, an additional set of second step education curriculum will be purchased so that each classroom teacher will have their own copy to use. Finally, a fun and interactive school-wide assembly that focuses on identity and character development will be scheduled to support the work you are doing with your students. Thank you again for your dedication, your commitment, and for the love you show to your own students and families each and every day. We hope that you feel encouraged, valued, and supported as you continue the important work of educating and impacting the students in your care. With much love, your friends from Kensington Community Church.
Thank you so much, you guys. You guys are the ones that get the standing O.
Go ahead.
All right. I just want to say thank you all from the bottom of my heart. It's really touching with all the work that we do here. And we know that we appreciate it. Because, you know, we go through so much, we take so much, and it's hard at the end of the day walking out, not thinking that you appreciate it as a teacher. From all of the things that are said to us from parents and kids, this just kind of lets us know that there's somebody out there that cares, and it just makes us want to move forward, me anyway. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Such a great story. And I've honestly never seen so many people so excited to receive copy paper. And as you can imagine, they weren't like, yes, I have all this copy paper to make all these photocopies or these printouts for myself. But of course, they had in mind their students. And when they got that gift card, what struck me was that they specifically had to say, don't use it on your students, because these teachers, their natural inclination was to go and to use it and to somehow figure out how to love and care for their students. And so just by a quick show of hands, how many of you are teachers in this room? Teachers. Like, can we give these people a huge hand? Thank you for those of you who are teachers, who every single day do exactly what we talked about. Because you go into your classrooms, you go into your schools, having the eyes of Jesus, having his heart, and having his hands, and that you meet real needs every single day. And I hear stories every day when my 5 and my 7-year-old come back about how much their teachers have impacted them. And so for all of you who are teachers, thank you for putting this into practice. And you don't get the credit that you deserve. And people often don't see what you do, but understand through your acts of kindness every single day that you are changing lives, that you are changing futures. And ultimately, the effect that you have continues to ripple out to impact so many others as well. So thank you, and we honor you. And this video, again, it just shows us this is what we can do as a community when we have these eyes, when we have this heart, and when we have these hands. And today, as I mentioned, we are wrapping up this series, but that doesn't mean that our intentional acts of kindness have to stop. Because really what my prayer has been this entire weekend for myself and for us as an entire community is that God, in the coming days, in the coming weeks, in the coming months, that when you put a real need in front of me and in front of us, that in that very specific time, you would give us the courage to step out of our comfort zone, to move beyond our fence, to meet that need in your way by giving away who we are, whatever that means in that situation. And that as we do that day after day, week after week, month after month, that we can have an impact on this world, and we could create and we can transform this world into more of the place that God created, destined, and intended it to be. That every single one of us, that we would do that as we go out today and as we enter into a new week. And so right now, we're gonna sing a song. And this song tells us, the very beginning of the song says, God, you give life, you give love, and you bring light in the darkness. And so often how God does this is through you and through me. He gives us the privilege to partner with him, and through our acts of kindness, to bring life, to bring love, and to give and to bring light into the darkness. And so if you're able to, let's all stand and rise together, and let's sing this out.
Give life, you are love, you bring light to the darkness, you give hope, you restore every heart that is broken. Great are you, Lord. Sing great, great are you, Lord. Sing, you give life one more time. You give life, you are love. You bring light to the darkness. You give hope, you restore every heart that is broken. Great are you, Lord. Sing, it's your breath, it's your breath in our lungs. So we pour out our praise, we pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs. So we pour out our praise to you only. It's your breath in our lungs. So we pour out our praise, we pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs. So we pour out our praise to you only. Sing all the earth, and all the earth will shout your praise. Our hearts will cry, these bones will sing. Great are you, Lord. Sing all the earth will shout your praise. Our hearts will cry, these bones will sing. Great are you, Lord. Sing all the earth will shout your praise. Our hearts will cry, these bones will sing. Great are you, Lord. Every voice sing, it's your breath, it's your breath in our lungs. So we pour out our praise, pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs. So we pour out our praise to you only. It's your breath in our lungs. So we pour out our praise, pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs. So we pour out our praise to you only. Sing great, great are you, Lord. Every voice sing great, great are you, Lord. One more time, sing great, great are you, Lord.
So, God, we pray, we thank you as we just sang that it is your breath that is in our lungs that allows us to move out and do these acts of kindness. And so, as we go into our week, we pray, give us your eyes to see the needs that are around us, and give us your heart to have courage and compassion, and then give us your hands that we would be able to meet these needs by giving ourselves away. So I thank you, God. Thank you for every single person in this room. And thank you that you want to use us to change this world, to create a more beautiful place. And we thank you and we pray all these things in your son's name. Amen. Want to invite all of you back next week for a brand new series, Don't Be That Guy. And if any of you would like to receive prayer, our prayer team will be right here in front. Thanks so much for being here, everyone. Have a great rest of your Sunday.